Dr. Sarah Chun pressed her palm against the cold metal wall of the Helix Station medical bay, feeling the subtle vibration of the massive space station's rotation through her fingertips. Through the viewport beside her, the swirling nebula known as the Crimson Veil painted space in shades of amber and rose, its beauty lost on most of the station's inhabitants who had grown accustomed to such wonders. "You're certain about this decision, Dr. Chin?" The voice belonged to Administrator Vex, a tall, blue-skinned Kalari whose 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep concern among his species. "The procedure is experimental at best. The compatibility rates between human and Zephyrian physiology are theoretical." Sarah turned away from the viewport, her brown eyes meeting two of Vex 4. "I've reviewed the data 17 times, Administrator. The neural pathways are similar enough. The risk is acceptable." "Acceptable to whom?" Vex translator rendered his tone as skeptical. "You're proposing to give your eyes to Prince Kale Thyss of the Zephyrian dynasty, a being whose people consider humans barely above the level of intelligent livestock." Sarah's jaw tightened. She had heard this argument countless times over the past 3 months, ever since the proposal had first crossed her desk. The Zephyrian prince, heir to one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, had been born without the ability to see electromagnetic radiation in any spectrum. For his people, who navigated space using bioelectric fields and could perceive 11 different types of energy signatures, blindness was not just a disability. It was a complete disconnection from their fundamental way of existence. "His people's opinion of humanity doesn't change the fact that he's suffering," Sarah replied, moving to the medical console where holographic displays showed the prince's complete medical history. "Look at these scans, Administrator. He's been in isolation for 200 years. His own family has given up on him." The hologram flickered, showing the elegant form of Prince Kale Thyss. Even in the medical imaging, his alien beauty was evident. 7 feet tall with crystalline skin that should have shimmered with bioelectric patterns, he appeared dim and lifeless in the scans. His elongated skull housed a brain that was fully functional except for the neural clusters responsible for processing visual input, clusters that had never developed properly. "The Zephyrians have the most advanced regenerative technology in the galaxy," Vex continued, his voice taking on a pleading tone. "If they cannot help their own prince, because their technology is based on energy manipulation," Sarah interrupted, pulling up another set of displays. "They can regrow limbs, repair organs, even transfer consciousness, but they can't create something from nothing. His visual cortex lacks the fundamental architecture for their type of sight. But human eyes." She gestured to a comparison chart. "Human eyes are primitive enough to be compatible with basic neural interfaces. We see simple electromagnetic radiation, light. It's crude by their standards, but it would give him something he's never had." Vex's 4 eyes focused on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "And what would you gain from this sacrifice, Doctor?" "The Zephyrians have made no promises of compensation. In fact, their delegation made it quite clear they consider this offer an insult, charity from an inferior species." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching the prince's medical data scroll across the display. She thought about her childhood, growing up in the slums of Neo Francisco after the Kalari had established their protectorate over Earth. She remembered watching the massive alien ships descend from the sky, their blue-skinned crews treating humans like children at best, pests at worst. She remembered her mother working 18-hour shifts in the Kalari biolabs, desperate to earn enough credits to buy Sarah's way into a decent education. "I became a doctor to help people," she said finally. "The species of my patient has never been relevant to that oath." Vex made a sound that his translator couldn't interpret, then shook his head. "The medical board has approved your request, Dr. Chun, though I personally think you're making a mistake that will benefit no one. The prince arrives tomorrow with a full Zephyrian medical team. They've agreed to allow you to observe the procedure, but they've made it clear that any human involvement beyond the organ donation will be minimal." Sarah nodded, having expected as much. The Zephyrians viewed other species' medicine as primitive at best, dangerous at worst. The fact that they were even considering using human organs was a sign of their desperation. "There is one more thing," Vex added, his tone becoming more serious. "The prince himself has requested to meet with you before the procedure. Apparently, He wants to understand why a human would make such an offering. This surprised Sarah. In all her research about Zephyrian culture, she had learned that they rarely spoke directly to members of species they considered inferior. Royal protocols were especially strict about such interactions. When? She asked. In 1 hour. Chamber 7 has been prepared for the meeting. I must warn you, Dr. Chun, Prince HFYSS may be disabled, but he is still royalty of one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. Show proper respect. Sarah spent the next hour reviewing Zephyrian customs and formal protocols. She changed into her most formal medical uniform and practiced the proper greetings, though she doubted her pronunciation of the prince's native language would be acceptable to royal standards. Chamber 7 had been modified with special atmospheric controls to accommodate Zephyrian physiology. The gravity had been reduced to match their homeworld, and the lighting had been adjusted to include several spectrums that Sarah couldn't see but that would normally allow Zephyrians to perceive the bioelectric auras of other beings. When the doors opened, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Prince HFYSS was even more imposing in person than in his medical scans. His crystalline skin was translucent, revealing the elegant structure of his skeleton beneath. His limbs were elongated and graceful, and his head was crowned with what appeared to be natural crystal formations. But his eyes, or rather, the spaces where his eyes should have been, were covered by an ornate metal mask that bore the royal crest of his house. He moved with careful, measured steps, one hand trailing along the wall for guidance. Behind him walked a shorter Zephyrian wearing the elaborate robes of a high-ranking court official. Your Highness, Sarah said, executing the formal bow she had practiced. I am honored by your presence. The prince tilted his head slightly, and, when he spoke, his voice was like the sound of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. His translator, more advanced than any Sarah had encountered, rendered his words in perfect English with emotional undertones intact. Dr. Sarah Chun, he said, her name sounding musical in his pronunciation. I confess myself puzzled by your offering. My advisors tell me that humans rarely act without seeking advantage for themselves or their species. Yet you propose to give me your sight, knowing that my people have offered nothing in return. Sarah straightened from her bow. Your Highness, I don't seek advantage. I'm a doctor, and you're a patient who needs help that I can provide. The prince was quiet for a long moment, his head tilted as if listening to something she couldn't hear. You speak of me as a patient, not as royalty. This is unusual. Forgive me if I've given offense, Sarah said quickly. I meant no disrespect to your station. No offense taken, the prince replied, surprising her. I find your perspective refreshing. I have been surrounded by courtiers and advisors my entire life, all of whom see my disability as a reflection on the dynasty's strength. You are the first to simply see it as, what did you call it? Something that needs help. He took a step closer to her, and Sarah could see that beneath the mask, his face was perfect except for the absence of organs in his eye sockets. The bone structure was elegant, almost ethereal, but the emptiness where his eyes should have been gave him an otherworldly, haunting appearance. I must ask you directly, Dr. Chun, the prince continued. Do you truly understand what you are offering to sacrifice? Your people's eyes may be primitive by our standards, but they are the only way your species perceives the world around you. You would be giving up your connection to reality as you know it. Sarah had thought about this question countless times over the past 3 months. I understand the medical implications, Your Highness, but I also understand that you've never seen anything. Never watched a sunrise, or seen the face of someone you care about, or observed the beauty of the cosmos. If my sacrifice can give you even a fraction of that experience, then it's worth it. The prince was silent again, his head tilted in that listening posture. Finally, he spoke. My court physician warns me that the procedure may not work. Human neurology is so different from ours that there's a significant chance my brain will reject your organs entirely. I've reviewed the compatibility studies, Sarah replied. The risk exists, but the potential benefits to me, the prince interrupted gently. But what of the certainty of loss to you? If the procedure fails, you will have sacrificed your sight for nothing. Sarah met his masked gaze steadily. Your Highness, with respect, that's not nothing. The attempt itself has value. Knowledge gained from the procedure could help others. Medical advancement often requires individuals willing to take risks for the benefit of others. The prince reached up and touched the edge of his mask, a gesture that his attendant quickly moved to stop with a sharp intake of breath. But the prince waved the other Zephyrian away. "Dr. Chun," he said, his voice softer now, "I have lived for 2 centuries in darkness. Not the simple absence of light that your people might experience, but a complete disconnection from the fundamental way my species experiences reality. I cannot perceive energy fields, cannot sense the life forces that surround me, cannot navigate space as my people do. I am, in effect, cut off from the universe itself." He paused, his hand still touching the mask. "But, in my isolation, I have developed other ways of understanding the world. I can sense the emotional resonance of those around me, the subtle changes in bioelectric fields that accompany different mental states. Right now, Dr. Chun, I can sense no deception from you, no hidden agenda. Your offer appears to be exactly what you claim, a simple desire to help." "It is," Sarah said quietly. "Then, I accept your gift," the prince said formally. "But I want you to understand something. If this procedure succeeds, you will not simply be giving me the ability to see light and shadow. According to my physicians, the neural interfaces required will create a connection between your visual cortex and mine. We may share more than just the physical organs. We may share the very experience of sight itself." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. This was information that hadn't been included in any of the medical briefings she had received. "What does that mean exactly?" The prince's attendant stepped forward. "Your Highness, perhaps such details are not necessary." Silence. The prince said firmly, though not unkindly, "Dr. Chun deserves to know the full implications of her choice." He turned back to Sarah. "It means, Doctor, that when I see through your eyes, you may see through mine. And Zephyrian sight is extensive." "Extensive how?" Sarah asked. "We see not just electromagnetic radiation, but bioelectric fields, quantum fluctuations, the very fabric of space-time itself. We can perceive the connections between all living things, the flow of energy through the cosmos, the hidden patterns that bind the universe together." The prince's voice took on an almost mystical quality. "If the neural link is established, you may find yourself seeing things that no human has ever perceived before." Sarah stared at him, trying to process the implications. "You're saying that I might not just be blind after the surgery. I might be able to see in ways I never imagined?" "It's possible," the prince admitted. "But it's also possible that your human brain will be unable to process such input, and you will be left with nothing but confusion and pain. We simply don't know." The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the atmospheric processors. Sarah found herself thinking about the countless patients she had treated over the years, the risks she had taken to save lives, the oaths she had sworn as a doctor. But this was different. This was a leap into the complete unknown, with consequences that could reshape her understanding of existence itself. "Your Highness," she said finally, "I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll answer honestly." "Of course. Why are you telling me this?" "Your physicians could have performed the surgery without explaining these risks. Why give me the chance to change my mind?" The prince was quiet for a long moment, his head tilted in that characteristic listening posture. When he spoke, his voice was filled with something that might have been sadness. "Because, Dr. Chun, I have spent 200 years learning what it means to live without one of the most fundamental senses. I would not wish that experience on anyone, especially not someone who is choosing it voluntarily for my benefit." He paused. "And because in all my years of isolation, no one has ever offered me a gift without expecting something in return. If you are truly willing to make this sacrifice out of simple compassion, then you deserve to know exactly what you're risking." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest, a recognition of something rare and precious. Here was a being who, despite his royal status and alien nature, understood the true weight of her offering and respected her enough to be completely honest about the risks. "I appreciate your honesty, Your Highness," she said. "But my answer remains the same. I want to help you, regardless of the personal cost." The prince reached up again and, this time, removed his mask entirely. Beneath it, his face was hauntingly beautiful, with high cheekbones and elegant features. But where his eyes should have been, there were only empty sockets lined with delicate crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with a faint internal light. Then, tomorrow, he said, we will discover together what it means. She gave her eyes to the blind alien prince. And, woke seeing through the stars, the medical bay had been transformed overnight into something Sarah barely recognized. Zephyrian medical equipment filled the space. Devices that hummed with an energy she could feel in her bones and cast shadows that seemed to move independently of their light sources. The air itself felt different, charged with particles that made her skin tingle and her hair stand on end. Dr. HFY Sesnara, the chief Zephyrian physician, moved between the instruments with fluid grace. Her crystalline skin pulsed with complex patterns of light that Sarah's translator identified as medical diagnostic readings, though the meaning of the patterns was lost on human perception. Unlike the prince, Dr. HFY Sesnara made no effort to hide her disdain for human medicine. The surgical chamber has been prepared to accommodate primitive neural interfaces, she said, her tone making it clear that primitive was not a neutral medical assessment. We have modified our equipment to work with human brain chemistry, though I must emphasize that this procedure has never been attempted between our species. Sarah nodded, dressed in the simple surgical gown that the Zephyrians had provided. The fabric felt strange against her skin, almost alive, responding to her body temperature and adjusting its properties accordingly. I understand the risks, Doctor. Do you? Dr. Sesnara's four eyes fixed on Sarah with an intensity that was almost predatory. Your species' understanding of neural medicine is approximately equivalent to our ancestors' knowledge from 3,000 years ago. You are volunteering for a procedure that even our most advanced physicians consider experimental. Dr. HFY Sesnara, came the prince's voice from the doorway. He entered flanked by two members of his royal guard, beings whose crystalline armor pulsed with defensive energy patterns. Dr. Chen has already demonstrated her understanding of and commitment to this procedure. Your continued attempts to discourage her seem unnecessary. The Zephyrian physician's light patterns shifted to what Sarah's translator identified as surprised deference. My apologies, Your Highness. I merely wanted to ensure that all parties understood the implications. I appreciate your thoroughness, the prince replied, moving carefully to a raised platform in the center of the room. But Dr. Chun has proven herself to be remarkably well-informed for a human physician. Sarah caught something in the exchange that troubled her. Dr. Sesnara's obvious surprise at the prince's defense of her, and the subtle emphasis he had placed on for a human physician. Even here, even as she was preparing to sacrifice her sight for him, the fundamental prejudices that divided their species remained. If we're ready to proceed, Sarah said, moving toward the second surgical platform, I'd like to review the neural interface protocols one more time. Dr. HFY Sesnara activated a holographic display that showed the complex procedure in 3 dimensions. The process requires complete neural mapping of both subjects, she explained. We will then remove your optical organs and optic nerves, while simultaneously installing biomechanical interfaces that will allow Prince Kale HFY's brain to process human-style visual input. The display showed Sarah's eyes being carefully extracted and connected to a network of crystalline filaments that would integrate with the prince's nervous system. But there was something else in the hologram, additional interfaces that hadn't been explained in the preliminary briefings. What are these? Sarah asked, pointing to the extra neural connections. Dr. HFY Sesnara's light patterns shifted to what might have been discomfort. Compensatory interfaces. Due to the fundamental differences between human and Zephyrian neurology, we must create bidirectional pathways to ensure successful integration. Bidirectional? Sarah's medical training immediately caught the implication. You mean the neural link will work both ways? Theoretically, the prince said, his voice carefully neutral. The interfaces are designed primarily to allow my brain to process input from your visual organs. But there may be secondary effects. Sarah felt a chill of realization. You're saying that I might be able to perceive through your neural pathways, even without physical eyes? It's possible, Dr. HFY Sesnara admitted reluctantly. Zephyrian neural architecture includes redundant sensory processing clusters. If the interface integrates successfully, you may gain access to some of those functions. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. She wouldn't just be losing her sight. She would be entering into a permanent neural link with an alien mind. She would be connected to Prince KLTHYSS in ways that no human and Zephyrian had ever been connected before. Why wasn't this explained to me earlier? She asked. The prince stepped forward, his masked face turning toward her. Because we weren't certain it would be necessary. The bidirectional interface was developed as a failsafe. If your visual organs are rejected by my system, the reverse pathway might allow us to share sensory input in other ways. And if both directions of the interface succeed, then we will be connected in ways that neither of our species has ever experienced, the prince said quietly. We will share not just sight, but potentially all sensory input. We will, in effect, be able to experience reality through each other's perceptions. Sarah stared at the holographic display, watching the complex web of neural connections that would bind her mind to the alien prince. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, a complete merging of two different ways of experiencing the universe. Dr. Chun, Dr. Thysnara said, her tone less hostile than before. This level of neural integration has profound implications. You would be connected to Prince KLTHYSS permanently. There would be no way to reverse the process. What exactly does that mean for my daily life? Sarah asked. The prince answered before his physician could respond. It means that you would experience some degree of sensory input from my perceptions at all times. And I would experience yours. The intensity would vary based on focus and emotional state, but the connection would always be present. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to imagine what such a connection would feel like. To have another consciousness sharing her perceptions, to see reality through alien senses that could perceive quantum fluctuations and bioelectric fields. Is there any way to know what the experience would be like before we proceed? Dr. Thysnara manipulated the holographic controls, and the display zoomed in on a section of Zephyrian neural tissue. Your Highness, with your permission, we could demonstrate a limited neural connection using temporary interfaces. The prince tilted his head in consideration. Explain. A brief, surface-level connection that would allow Dr. Chun to experience a sample of Zephyrian sensory input. Nothing permanent, nothing that would interfere with the main procedure, but enough to give her some understanding of what the full integration would involve. Sarah felt her heart racing. Is that safe? Temporarily, yes, Dr. Thysnara replied. The demonstration would last only a few minutes, and would involve no surgical procedures. The prince was quiet for a long moment, his head tilted in that characteristic listening posture. Finally, he nodded. Dr. Chun, the choice is yours. You may proceed with the full surgery based on our current explanations, or you may experience a preview of what our neural connection might involve. Sarah looked around the transformed medical bay, at the alien technology that hummed with energies she couldn't identify, at the prince whose empty eye sockets were hidden behind his ornate mask. Everything about this situation was beyond her experience, beyond human understanding. But that was exactly why she had to see it through. Show me, she said. Dr. Thysnara moved to a smaller device that resembled a crown made of crystalline threads. This neural interface crown will create a temporary connection between your consciousness and His Highness's sensory perception clusters. You will experience a sample of how Zephyrians perceive reality. The prince moved to a second crown-like device, settling it carefully over his mask. Dr. Chun, I should warn you, Zephyrian perception is far more complex than human sight. The experience may be overwhelming. Sarah sat down and allowed Dr. Thysnara to place the neural crown on her head. The crystalline threads were warm against her scalp, and she could feel them making contact with her skin. Tiny electrical impulses began to flow through the connections, and her vision flickered. Initiating connection, Dr. Thysnara announced. The world exploded. Sarah's human vision didn't disappear. Instead, it was suddenly layered with perceptions so complex and multidimensional that her mind struggled to process them. She could see the bioelectric fields of everyone in the room, pulsing networks of energy that revealed not just their physical health, but their emotional states, their intentions, even fragments of their thoughts. Dr. HFY appeared as a brilliant constellation of light patterns, her scientific curiosity mixed with deep concern radiating as visible auras around her crystalline form. The royal guards were towers of controlled energy, their loyalty to the prince manifesting as golden threads that connected them directly to his presence. And the prince. Prince Kale Thys was unlike anything Sarah could have imagined. Where his physical form appeared dim and lifeless to normal sight, his bioelectric presence was incredibly complex and beautiful. Layers of consciousness moved through his mind like aurora patterns, and Sarah could sense the vast loneliness that had shaped him, but also an unexpected strength and curiosity that burned like a steady flame. But it wasn't just the people in the room that had changed. Sarah could see the space station itself as a living network of energy flows. She could perceive the quantum fluctuations that held matter together, see the gravitational fields that kept the station spinning, witness the flow of information through the computer systems as streams of light. Beyond the station, through the walls and viewports, she could see space itself as a tapestry of energy. Stars weren't just points of light. They were massive entities with their own consciousness-like patterns, connected to each other by invisible threads of gravitational and electromagnetic force. The nebula that had appeared beautiful through human eyes was revealed as a birthplace of consciousness itself, where new forms of life were constantly being born from the quantum foam of creation. And, threading through it all, Sarah could sense something else, other minds, other forms of consciousness scattered across the galaxy. Some were familiar, like the collective awareness of the Kalari research stations. Others were completely alien, vast intelligences that spanned entire star systems or tiny, flickering thoughts that existed for only nanoseconds in the quantum substrate of reality. Can you see? The prince's voice came from everywhere at once, not through her ears but directly into her consciousness through their shared connection. Sarah tried to respond but found that her normal speech felt clumsy and inadequate. Instead, she projected her thoughts directly through the neural link. I can see everything. This is only a fraction of full Zephyrian perception, the prince's mental voice replied. And your human brain is processing it in simplified terms. If we complete the permanent integration, you would gradually develop the ability to perceive these realities in their full complexity. Through their shared connection, Sarah could feel the prince's excitement and wonder at experiencing her human visual perceptions. To his consciousness, her simple ability to see light and color was exotic and beautiful in its directness and clarity. Your people see reality with such focus, he continued. You perceive individual photons as distinct information rather than as part of the larger energy matrix. It's remarkable. Sarah found herself laughing, though in the neural connection it manifested as ripples of joy that she could see spreading through the quantum field around them. And your people see the universe as a living entity. Every star, every planet, every particle of matter connected in ways I never imagined. Dr. Chun, Dr. Thys's voice cut through their shared experience. We need to terminate the connection. Your neural patterns are showing signs of stress. Sarah felt the temporary interface beginning to disengage, and the incredible multidimensional reality began to fade. But before it disappeared entirely, she experienced one last revelation. She could sense other humans scattered across the galaxy, their bioelectric signatures marking them as clearly as fingerprints. They were not the primitive, isolated species she had always believed them to be. They were part of the same cosmic network as every other form of consciousness, their thoughts and dreams contributing to the vast symphony of galactic awareness. As her normal human vision returned, Sarah found herself gasping and disoriented. The medical bay looked flat and colorless after the incredible richness of Zephyrian perception. Dr. Thys was monitoring readings on a medical scanner, her light patterns cycling through what Sarah's translator identified as concern. Are you all right? The prince asked, his voice sounding distant and limited after their direct mental connection. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes, not sure when she had started crying. I had no idea. The universe is so much more than I ever dreamed. Now you understand what the permanent integration would involve, Dr. Thys said, her tone more respectful than it had been before. You would gain access to perceptions that no human has ever experienced, but you would also be permanently connected to Prince KLTHYSS's consciousness. Sarah looked at the prince, seeing him now with her limited human eyes, but remembering the incredible complexity and beauty of his true presence. And you would gain access to human sight, but also to human consciousness. Yes, the prince replied. We would be bound together in ways that neither of our species has ever experienced. It would be a form of unity that transcends the normal boundaries between individuals. Sarah stood up from the chair, feeling steady despite the overwhelming nature of what she had just experienced. The choice before her was clear now, not just to give her eyes to help a disabled alien prince, but to become part of something larger than herself, to bridge the gap between two species that had been separated by prejudice and misunderstanding. Dr. THYSS Nara, she said firmly. I'm ready to proceed with the full surgery. The Zephyrian physician's light patterns shifted to surprise. Dr. Chun, you understand that this connection will change you fundamentally? You will no longer be entirely human. And His Highness will no longer be entirely Zephyrian, Sarah replied. Will be something new, something that both species need. The prince stepped forward, his masked face turned toward her. Dr. Chun, are you certain? Once this procedure is complete, there will be no returning to the life you knew before. She gave her eyes to the blind alien prince. And, woke seeing through the stars consciousness returned to Sarah like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. Not the gentle awakening she expected, but a sudden, overwhelming flood of sensation that threatened to drown her mind. She wasn't just waking up. She was being born into an entirely new form of existence. The first thing she experienced wasn't sight in any way she understood it, but awareness. Pure, multidimensional awareness that flowed through her consciousness like liquid light. She could sense the medical bay around her not as a room with walls and equipment, but as a complex web of energy patterns, quantum fluctuations, and living consciousness. Sarah? The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating directly in her mind rather than through her ears. It was the prince, but his mental presence was far more vivid and immediate than any spoken word had ever been. I'm here, she tried to respond, but found that the concept of here had become meaningless. Her consciousness seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, in her own body lying on the surgical table, in the prince's awareness as he experienced his first moments of human-style sight, and somehow distributed throughout the entire quantum field that surrounded them. The procedure was successful, came Dr. Kilnara's voice, though Sarah perceived it not as sound but as patterns of bioelectric activity that conveyed meaning directly to her consciousness. Both subjects show complete neural integration with no signs of rejection. Dr. Chun, can you understand me? Sarah tried to focus on the physician's presence and found herself perceiving Dr. THYSS Nara as a brilliant constellation of crystalline thoughts and electromagnetic emotions. The Zephyrian's scientific fascination blazed like a small star, mixed with something that might have been awe. I can understand you, Sarah managed to project through her newly integrated neural pathways. But everything is different. That's normal, Dr. THYSS Nara replied. Your brain is adapting to process sensory input that no human nervous system has ever encountered. The adjustment period may take several days. And Prince KLTHYSS? Sarah asked, though as soon as she formed the thought, she realized she could sense him directly through their shared connection. His presence burned in her awareness like a gentle flame, and she could feel his wonder and amazement as he experienced light for the first time in his 200-year existence. Sarah, the prince's mental voice came again, filled with emotion that she could perceive as cascading patterns of golden energy. I can see light. I can see color. I can see you. Through their neural link, Sarah experienced the prince's first visual perceptions as he saw with her transplanted eyes. The medical bay appeared to him as a revelation of beauty that brought tears, actual tears, to his new human eyes. Every surface, every curve, every play of light and shadow was a miracle that he had never imagined possible. But what struck Sarah most powerfully was how her simple human vision was being translated through his Zephyrian consciousness. The prince wasn't just seeing light. He was perceiving the electromagnetic spectrum as a living language, understanding the photons that struck her retinas as carriers of information about the fundamental structure of reality. "Your eyes are remarkable," he continued, his thoughts flowing directly into her consciousness. "They don't just detect light, they parse it, categorize it, create meaning from chaos. It's like seeing the universe's own handwriting." Sarah tried to open her own eyes and realized that the concept no longer applied to her in any conventional sense. She had no physical eyes to open, but through her connection to the prince's visual cortex, she could perceive the medical bay with a clarity that far exceeded anything she had ever experienced as a purely human being. More importantly, her Zephyrian-enhanced perception was beginning to stabilize, and she was starting to see reality in ways that defied description. The walls of the medical bay weren't solid barriers, but permeable boundaries through which she could perceive the vast complexity of the space station beyond. She could see the recycling systems processing atmospheric gases as rivers of molecular activity, the computer networks as cascading waterfalls of information, the living beings throughout the station as bright nodes of consciousness connected by invisible threads of social and emotional interaction. "Dr. Chun," Dr. HFY said, her light patterns now cycling through what Sarah's enhanced perception identified as profound respect. "Your neural adaptation is progressing far more rapidly than our models predicted. Most beings require weeks to process even basic Zephyrian sensory input." "I think it's because of our connection," Sarah replied, feeling the truth of it as she spoke. "The prince's consciousness is helping to translate the input into terms I can understand. And your human perspective is giving me context for what I'm seeing through your eyes," the prince added. "We're not just sharing organs, we're sharing understanding." Sarah attempted to sit up and found that her enhanced perception made the movement far more complex than she expected. She could feel not just her physical body moving, but the bioelectric fields that animated her muscles, the quantum interactions that held her cellular structure together, the gravitational forces that determined her orientation in space. "Slowly, Dr. Chun," Dr. THYSS Naro advised. "Your brain is processing information on multiple levels simultaneously. Physical movement requires conscious coordination until your nervous system adapts." As Sarah carefully maneuvered herself into a sitting position, she became aware of something that made her pause and wonder. Through her connection to the prince's consciousness, she could perceive his emotional state with perfect clarity, and what she found there was not just gratitude, but a deep, profound joy that seemed to illuminate everything around them. "Kale THYSS," she said, using his name for the first time, and feeling strange intimacy of their shared neural space. "You're happy." "Happy is insufficient," he replied, his mental voice warm with an emotion that manifested as golden cascades of energy through their connection. "Sarah, I have lived for 2 centuries believing that I was fundamentally broken, cut off from the most basic way my species experiences reality. But now," he paused, and she could feel him processing the wonder of simple light falling across crystalline surfaces. "Now I understand that I wasn't broken. I was simply waiting to see the universe through different eyes." Through their shared perception, Sarah watched as the prince turned his attention toward the viewport that looked out onto the Crimson Veil Nebula. Her human eyes, now housed in his alien skull, showed him the swirling clouds of cosmic dust and gas and frequencies of light that his species had never been able to perceive directly. But Sarah's experience of his wonder was even more extraordinary. Through his Zephyrian consciousness, she could perceive the nebula as a vast nursery of consciousness where new forms of awareness were constantly being born from the quantum interactions of matter and energy. She could see the stellar winds that sculpted its shape as streams of living information, and the young stars at its heart as beacons of possibility that called to every sentient being in the galaxy. "This is what you gave me," the prince said, his thoughts flowing directly into her awareness. "Not just sight, but an entirely new way of understanding reality." "And this is what you gave me in return," Sarah replied, her consciousness reaching out to touch the infinite complexity of the galactic network that connected all living things. "I thought I was making a sacrifice, but I was actually receiving a gift." Dr. HFY moved between monitoring devices that recorded their neural activity, her light patterns cycling through amazement and scientific curiosity. The integration is stable, she announced. Both subjects are showing neural plasticity far beyond our theoretical models. It's as if your consciousness were designed to complement each other. Dr. HFY Sarah said, her enhanced perception allowing her to see the physician's thoughts with startling clarity. You're surprised that the procedure worked so well. The Zephyrian physician paused in her monitoring, her four eyes focusing on Sarah with an intensity that would have been uncomfortable before her enhancement. Dr. Chun, I must be honest with you. When this procedure was first proposed, my colleagues and I believed it would fail catastrophically. Human and Zephyrian neurology are so different that we expected complete rejection. Then, why did you agree to attempt it? Sarah asked. Dr. Snara's light patterns shifted to what Sarah now recognized as embarrassment mixed with reluctant admiration. Because Prince Kale THYSS insisted. And because, despite our assumptions about human medicine, your research into neural compatibility was surprisingly thorough. Sarah felt a flash of the old irritation she had experienced at the casual dismissal of human capabilities, but her enhanced consciousness allowed her to perceive the deeper truth behind Dr. Snara's words. The Zephyrian physician wasn't just prejudiced. She was genuinely shocked to discover that humans were capable of medical insights that her advanced species had overlooked. What did we miss? The prince asked, his curiosity flowing through their shared connection. Dr. Snara manipulated her monitoring devices, calling up complex displays that showed their intertwined neural activity. Human consciousness appears to have a flexibility that Zephyrian minds lack. Your species may perceive reality in what we consider primitive terms, but that simplicity allows for adaptations that our more specialized consciousness cannot achieve. Sarah studied the neural displays through her enhanced perception and realized that Dr. Snara was seeing something profound. The patterns of activity in her brain were unlike anything in Zephyrian neurology, not because they were more advanced, but because they were more adaptable. You're saying that humans are naturally better at integrating different types of consciousness? Sarah asked. I'm saying that humans may be the only species we've encountered that can successfully bridge the perceptual gaps between different forms of sentient life. Dr. Snara replied, her tone carrying implications that made Sarah's enhanced consciousness recoil. What do you mean? The prince asked, though Sarah could feel through their connection that he was beginning to understand the implications as well. Dr. Snara's light patterns shifted to something that Sarah's translator identified as scientific excitement mixed with deep concern. The neural interface between you two isn't just allowing you to share sensory input. You're creating something entirely new. A hybrid consciousness that can perceive reality from both human and Zephyrian perspectives simultaneously. Sarah felt a chill of realization. You're saying that we've accidentally created a new form of consciousness. Not accidentally, Dr. Snara corrected. Dr. Chin's research specifically addressed the theoretical possibility of cross-species neural integration. But I don't think you realize the full implications of what you were proposing. Through their shared connection, Sarah felt the prince's growing understanding and his mixture of excitement and apprehension. What implications? He asked. Dr. Snara adjusted her displays to show the broader galactic communications network, the vast web of quantum entanglement, and hyperspace relays that connected all civilized worlds. The galaxy contains dozens of sentient species, each with their own unique ways of perceiving reality. For centuries, these different forms of consciousness have been unable to truly understand each other. We communicate through translators and mathematical concepts, but we can never really share our fundamental experience of existence. Sarah stared at the display, her enhanced perception allowing her to see the network not just as a communication system, but as a frustrated web of isolated consciousness, each species trapped in their own perceptual limitations. But what you two have accomplished, Dr. Snara continued, suggests the possibility of creating permanent bridges between different types of consciousness. Humans could serve as neural intermediaries, allowing various species to directly share their perceptual experiences. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. You're talking about humans becoming permanent neural bridges between alien species? I'm talking about the possibility of true galactic unity, Dr. Tsnara replied. A network of consciousness that would allow every sentient species to understand reality from every other species' perspective. Sarah felt the prince's thoughts racing through their connection as he processed the magnitude of what they had accidentally discovered. Sarah, he said, his mental voice filled with awe and uncertainty. We may have just changed the fundamental relationship between all sentient life in the galaxy. Through her enhanced perception, Sarah could see the truth of it. Their neural connection wasn't just a medical procedure. It was a proof of concept for something that could reshape galactic civilization. But the cost would be enormous. Humans would have to sacrifice their individual consciousness to serve as living bridges between alien minds. Dr. Tsnara, Sarah said carefully. How many humans would be required to create such a network? The Zephyrian physician's light patterns cycled through complex calculations. Theoretically, thousands, perhaps tens of thousands. Each major species would require multiple human intermediaries to establish stable neural bridges. Sarah thought about the billions of humans scattered across colony worlds throughout the galaxy, most of them living as second-class citizens under alien protection. The idea that humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization might be their willingness to sacrifice their individual consciousness for the sake of interspecies understanding was both inspiring and terrifying. But it would be voluntary, the prince said firmly, his thoughts flowing through their connection with absolute certainty. No one could be forced into neural integration. The choice would have to be freely made by individuals who understood the implications. Like I did, Sarah said quietly. Like you did, he agreed. But, Sarah, you need to understand. If this becomes known, if other species learn what we've accomplished here, everything will change. Humanity will no longer be seen as primitive and expendable. You'll be seen as the key to achieving something that every advanced civilization has dreamed of for millennia. Sarah's enhanced consciousness reached out across the quantum networks that connected the space station to the rest of the galaxy. And she could perceive the vast loneliness of billions of sentient beings, all trapped in their own perceptual limitations, all yearning for true understanding with other forms of consciousness. Then, we'll have to be very careful about how this information is revealed, she said. Because once it becomes known, there will be pressure on humans to volunteer for neural integration whether they truly want to or not. Agreed, the prince replied. But, Sarah, we also can't hide what we've discovered. The potential benefits for galactic civilization are too significant. Dr. Tsnara had been monitoring their exchange through bioelectric readings, and her light patterns showed deep concern. Your Highness, Dr. Chun, you're discussing matters that could affect the political structure of the entire galaxy. Such decisions are far beyond the scope of a medical procedure. Sarah felt the truth of that observation, but she also felt she gave her eyes to the blind alien prince. And, woke seeing through the stars 3 weeks after the neural integration, Sarah stood in what had once been the observation deck of Helix Station. Those standing and seeing had become concepts that bore little resemblance to their human definitions. Through her connection to Prince Kale Thys's consciousness, she experienced the chamber as a three-dimensional web of quantum interactions, bioelectric fields, and probability cascades that painted reality in colors that had no names in any spoken language. The prince moved beside her with newfound confidence, his human eyes taking in the vista of the Crimson Veil Nebula with an appreciation that made their shared consciousness sing with joy. But their peaceful moment of adaptation was about to end. The soft chime of the communication system announced an incoming message that would change everything. Your Highness, came the voice of Commander Zeth Kaler, the prince's military attaché. The Zephyrian High Council has received your initial report. They are requesting immediate clarification. Sarah felt the prince's emotional response through their neural link, a complex mixture of pride, apprehension, and determination that manifested as shifting patterns of light in her enhanced perception. They had both known this moment would come, but the speed of the council's response suggested that news of their successful integration had traveled faster than expected through diplomatic channels. What is the nature of their request? the prince asked, his mental voice carrying undertones that Sarah was learning to recognize as royal protocol asserting itself over personal preference. They want to see it for themselves, Commander Zethkaler replied. The entire High Council is en route to this station. They should arrive within 2 days. Through their connection, Sarah felt the prince's consciousness recoil from the implications. The Zephyrian High Council was composed of the 12 most powerful individuals in the Empire, beings whose collective decisions affected the lives of trillions of sentients across hundreds of star systems. Their personal intervention in what had begun as a simple medical procedure meant that the political ramifications were already spiraling beyond anyone's control. Dr. Chun, the prince said aloud, knowing that their shared consciousness made private communication impossible when others were present. We need to discuss the implications of this development. Sarah nodded, her enhanced perception allowing her to see Commander Zethkaler's bioelectric signature as he withdrew from the chamber. The military attaché's consciousness carried undertones of concern mixed with something that might have been awe. Apparently, even the prince's own staff were beginning to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented. When they were alone, the prince's mental voice flowed directly into Sarah's consciousness. The High Council's arrival means that our integration is no longer a private matter between us. It's become a matter of imperial policy. What does that mean for us? Sarah asked, though through their neural connection, she could already sense the direction of his thoughts. It means that we'll be studied, analyzed, and potentially used as the foundation for decisions that could affect the entire galaxy. The prince replied, his consciousness radiating frustration and protective concern. Sarah, when I agreed to this procedure, I thought I was simply trying to cure my blindness. I never intended to put you in the position of becoming a galactic political asset. Sarah felt his genuine distress and sent waves of reassurance through their shared connection. KLTHYSS. Neither of us knew what we were creating. But, now that we understand the implications, we have a responsibility to ensure that our discovery is used wisely. Do we? The prince asked, his thoughts tinged with doubt. Or do we have a responsibility to protect ourselves and others like us from becoming tools in a political transformation we never intended to trigger? Before Sarah could respond, the communication system activated again, this time with a priority signal that made the chamber's displays flicker with urgent energy patterns. Your Highness, came a new voice, Dr. Thyss Nara, speaking from the medical bay. We have a problem. I'm receiving communication requests from research institutions across the galaxy. Word of your integration has somehow leaked beyond official channels. Sarah felt a chill of apprehension flow through their shared consciousness. How many requests? She asked. Hundreds, Dr. Thyss Nara replied, her tone grim. And they're not just from Zephyrian institutions. The Kalari Science Directorate wants to examine you both. The Andromedan Collective is offering massive financial incentives for access to your neural integration data. Even species I've never heard of are demanding information about the procedure. Through their connection, Sarah felt the prince's royal training asserting itself as he processed the political crisis that was developing around them. Dr. Thyss Nara, implement medical isolation protocols immediately. No one except essential staff has access to either Dr. Chun or myself without explicit authorization from the High Council. Already done, Your Highness, the physician replied. But, I should inform you, there are ships arriving at the station that are not part of the official Zephyrian delegation. Representatives from at least 6 different species are requesting docking privileges. Sarah's enhanced perception allowed her to sense the growing tension throughout the station as alien delegations arrived with their own agendas. Through the quantum networks that connected Helix Station to the galactic communications grid, she could perceive the flood of information requests, political maneuvering, and scientific speculation that their integration had triggered. KLTHYSS, she said through their mental connection. We need to take control of this situation before it spirals completely out of hand. Agreed, the prince replied. But how? We're 2 individuals who accidentally discovered something that every advanced civilization in the galaxy wants to exploit. Sarah's enhanced consciousness reached out across the station's networks, and she began to perceive the true scope of the crisis they had created. The successful neural integration between a human and a Zephyrian wasn't just scientifically significant. It represented a potential shift in the galactic balance of power. Any species that could master cross-consciousness neural bridging would gain unprecedented diplomatic and strategic advantages. We have something that none of these other species possess, Sarah said, her thoughts flowing with growing confidence. We have direct experience with what neural integration actually involves. We know the costs and benefits better than any theoretical analysis could reveal. What are you suggesting? The prince asked. I'm suggesting that instead of hiding from this situation, we take control of it, Sarah replied. We become the authorities on cross-species neural integration. We set the standards, establish the protocols, and ensure that any future procedures are conducted ethically. Through their shared consciousness, Sarah felt the prince's initial resistance give way to understanding as he processed the implications of her proposal. You're talking about us becoming the foundation of an entirely new field of galactic medicine. I'm talking about us becoming the guardians of something that could either unite the galaxy or tear it apart, Sarah corrected. The choice isn't whether this technology will be developed. It's already been proven possible. The choice is whether it will be developed responsibly. The prince was quiet for a long moment, his consciousness cycling through the complex political and ethical implications. When he finally responded, his mental voice carried the authority of his royal position. Dr. Chun, if we're going to take this path, we need to establish our credibility before the High Council arrives. How? By demonstrating that our integration has given us capabilities that no one else possesses, the prince replied. And by proving that we can use those capabilities to benefit all species, not just our own. Before Sarah could ask what he meant, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Her enhanced perception immediately identified the source, a massive energy disturbance in the nearby system that was generating gravitational anomalies and subspace disruptions. All stations, this is Commander Vex, came the announcement over the station's communication system. We're detecting a critical situation in the Kepler 442 system. A cargo vessel carrying refugees from the Andromedan border conflicts has suffered catastrophic engine failure. They're trapped in a decaying orbit around the system's star with no functional navigation systems. Sarah felt the prince's consciousness immediately focus on the crisis, his royal training and natural compassion combining to create a determination that blazed through their shared awareness. How many refugees? He asked aloud. Approximately 3,000 beings from 17 different species, Commander Vex replied. The rescue operation is complicated by the gravitational distortions around the star and the ship's damaged systems. Standard navigation and rescue protocols are insufficient. Through their neural connection, Sarah felt the prince's realization forming at the same time as her own. Their enhanced consciousness gave them perceptual capabilities that no rescue team possessed. They could perceive the gravitational fields around the star as visible structures, see the energy patterns of the damaged ship as clear information, and process the complex three-dimensional mathematics required for a successful rescue operation. KLTHYSS, Sarah said through their mental link. We could guide a rescue mission. I know, he replied. But, Sarah, if we reveal our capabilities now, in such a public way, there will be no hiding what we've become. Sarah looked out at the nebula through the viewport, her enhanced vision showing her the vast network of consciousness that connected every living being in the galaxy. Through that network, she could sense the fear and desperation of the 3,000 refugees trapped around the distant star, beings from 17 different species who would die unless someone with unprecedented capabilities intervened to save them. Then, we don't hide, she said firmly. We show the galaxy exactly what cross-species neural integration can accomplish when it's used to help people instead of to gain power. The prince's consciousness flared with admiration and determination that made their shared awareness sing with harmonious purpose. Commander Vex, he called out formally. Prince KLTHYSS of the Zephyrian Dynasty volunteers to assist in the rescue operation. Dr. Chun, and I have capabilities that may be uniquely suited to this situation. There was a pause before Commander Vex responded, and Sarah could sense the administrator's confusion and concern through the station's communication networks. Your Highness, with respect, you have no training in rescue operations, and Dr. Chun is recovering from major surgery. Commander Vex, Sarah said, her voice carrying new authority that surprised even her. "We have capabilities that your rescue teams lack. Patch us through to the operations navigation systems, and we'll prove it." Another pause. Then, "Dr. Chun, are you requesting to interface directly with the rescue mission's control systems?" Sarah felt the prince's consciousness merge more completely with hers as they prepared to demonstrate their integrated capabilities to the galaxy. "We're requesting to guide the rescue operation using enhanced perceptual abilities that no one else possesses," she replied. 3,000 lives are at stake. This isn't the time for political protocols." Through their shared awareness, Sarah and the prince could already perceive the distant star system where the refugees were trapped. The gravitational anomalies that made rescue impossible for standard navigation appeared as clear, navigable structures in their enhanced consciousness. The damaged ship's energy signature was as visible to them as a lighthouse beacon. "Connecting you to rescue coordination now," Commander Vex said, his tone carrying a mixture of hope and disbelief. As the navigation systems came online in their shared consciousness, Sarah and Prince KLTHSS began to guide the rescue operation with precision that defied conventional understanding of physics and navigation. Their integrated awareness processed gravitational fields, energy distortions, and three-dimensional space as a single, comprehensible system. Within minutes, they had plotted a rescue course that would have taken conventional navigation computers hours to calculate. Within an hour, they had guided the rescue ships through gravitational anomalies that should have been impossible to navigate, saving all 3,000 refugees without losing a single life. And they had done it all while being monitored by representatives from dozens of alien species who were now witnessing firsthand what cross-species neural integration could accomplish. She gave her eyes to the blind alien prince, and woke seeing through the stars. 6 months had passed since the rescue operation that revealed Sarah and Prince KLTHSS's capabilities to the galaxy, and Helix Station had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history, the first institute for cross-species consciousness integration. What had begun as a simple medical procedure had evolved into a movement that was reshaping the fundamental relationships between all sentient life in the known universe. Sarah stood in the Institute's central coordination chamber, though her existence had transcended such simple concepts as standing and location. Through her permanent neural integration with Prince KLTHYSS, her consciousness existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions of awareness that allowed her to perceive and interact with reality in ways that would have been impossible for any single species to achieve. The chamber around her hummed with the activities of the galaxy's first successful cross-species neural integration program. Volunteers from dozens of different species worked alongside human coordinators to establish new neural bridges that were creating unprecedented levels of interspecies understanding and cooperation. "Sarah," came the prince's mental voice, carrying undertones of pride and wonder that flowed through their shared consciousness like warm light. "Do you see what we've accomplished?" Through their integrated awareness, Sarah perceived the vast network of neural connections that now linked representative consciousness from 47 different species. Each integration had been carefully planned and executed according to the protocols that she and the prince had developed through months of intensive research and experimentation. "I see it," she replied through their mental link. "But, more importantly, I see what it's becoming." What they had created was far more than a collection of individual neural bridges. The network of integrated consciousness had begun to develop emergent properties that neither of them had anticipated. The connected beings weren't just sharing sensory input. They were creating a collective intelligence that could perceive and understand reality from multiple species' perspectives simultaneously. Dr. THSS Narao approached through the chamber, her crystalline skin displaying complex light patterns that Sarah's enhanced perception could read as easily as written language. The Zephyrian physician had become the Institute's chief medical officer, overseeing the health and adaptation of hundreds of integrated beings from across the galaxy. "The morning coordination session is ready to begin," Dr. THYSS Nara announced. "We have representatives from 12 new species requesting integration assessments, and the Galactic Unity Council wants a progress report on the diplomatic applications." Sarah nodded, her enhanced consciousness already reaching out across the Institute's network to coordinate with the other integrated beings who would participate in the session. What had once required formal meetings and translation protocols now happened through direct consciousness sharing that transcended the limitations of language and cultural barriers. The coordination chamber filled with beings whose appearances would have been impossible to imagine just months earlier. Humans whose consciousness had been expanded through integration with alien neural patterns worked alongside Zephyrians who saw reality through human eyes, Kalari whose rigid scientific minds had been opened to emotional perception through connection with empathic species, and dozens of other combinations that had created entirely new forms of awareness. At the center of it all, Sarah and Prince KLTHYSS served as the primary neural coordinators, their original integration having become the template for all subsequent procedures. Their shared consciousness had evolved into something that was simultaneously completely human and completely Zephyrian, while also being something entirely new. Before we begin today's session, the prince said aloud, his voice carrying the authority that came from being the galaxy's first successfully integrated being. I want to address the concerns that have been raised about the rapid expansion of our program. Sarah felt his thoughts flowing through their connection as he prepared to discuss the political and ethical challenges that had emerged as their movement grew. Not every species had embraced the concept of neural integration, and some viewed the Institute as a threat to the traditional boundaries that had defined galactic civilization for millennia. There are those who argue that we're moving too quickly, the prince continued, that we're undermining the natural diversity of consciousness that has made each species unique. They worry that universal integration will create a homogenized galactic mind that eliminates individual identity. Through the Institute's network, Sarah could sense the responses of the other integrated beings to this familiar concern. Each neural bridge had been carefully designed to preserve individual consciousness while enabling shared awareness, but the critics' fears weren't entirely unfounded. The collective intelligence that was emerging from their network was unlike anything that had existed before. What they don't understand, Sarah added, her voice carrying the confidence that came from months of experiencing the reality of integration firsthand, is that consciousness isn't diminished by sharing, it's expanded. Every being in our network retains their individual identity while gaining access to perspectives they could never have imagined alone. To demonstrate her point, Sarah opened her awareness to the chamber's network, allowing everyone present to experience a brief sample of her integrated consciousness. Through her human perspective enhanced by Zephyrian perception, they could see the chamber as a web of living light where each being's thoughts and emotions created visible patterns of beauty and meaning. Simultaneously, through Prince KLTHYSS's consciousness, they experienced the wonder of seeing electromagnetic light for the first time, the simple miracle of color and shadow that his species had never been able to perceive directly. The demonstration lasted only seconds, but its impact was profound. Even beings who had undergone integration months earlier were moved by the reminder of how much their awareness had grown through neural connection with other forms of consciousness. The critics also argue that humans are gaining disproportionate power through their role as neural bridges, the prince continued, addressing the political concerns that had become increasingly prominent as the Institute's influence grew. They suggest that humanity is using integration to achieve a position of galactic dominance that their technological limitations would never have allowed. Sarah felt a flash of the old anger at the casual dismissal of human capabilities, but her integrated consciousness immediately provided broader perspective. Through the network, she could perceive the genuine concerns of species who had dominated galactic politics for millennia and, suddenly, found themselves dependent on a species they had considered primitive. It's true that humans have a unique role in cross-species integration, she acknowledged. Our neural flexibility makes us effective bridges between different types of consciousness. But bridge implies connection, not control. We don't dominate the network, we facilitate it. Dr. THYSS Nara stepped forward, her light patterns cycling through what Sarah's enhanced perception recognized as scientific admiration mixed with political concern. Dr. Chun, Prince KLTHYSS, while the benefits of integration are undeniable, we must also address the practical limitations of our expansion. We currently have over 300 successful integrations, but demand for the procedure exceeds our capacity by several orders of magnitude. Sarah felt the weight of that reality through the Institute's network. Billions of beings across the galaxy had learned about the possibilities of consciousness integration, and millions were requesting procedures that the Institute couldn't possibly accommodate with current resources and personnel. Which brings us to today's primary discussion, the prince said, his mental voice flowing through their connection with undertones of anticipation and uncertainty. The proposal from the Galactic Unity Council for systematic integration programs across all member species. The proposal had arrived just days earlier, delivered by a joint delegation that included representatives from every major galactic civilization. It called for the establishment of integration centers in every major star system, with the goal of providing neural bridge procedures to anyone who requested them. On the surface, the proposal seemed to fulfill everything that Sarah and the prince had hoped to achieve when they first demonstrated the possibilities of cross-species consciousness sharing. "Your Highness," came Dr. Tiasnara's voice over the communication system, her tone filled with awe and scientific excitement. "The entire galactic communications network has been monitoring your rescue operation. Every major species in known space has just seen what you two can accomplish together." Sarah felt the weight of galactic attention settling around them like a mantle of responsibility. There would be no more hiding, no more privacy, no more simple existence as two individuals who had shared a medical procedure. KLTHYSS, she said through their mental connection, "We're not just connected to each other anymore. We're connected to the entire galaxy's future." "I know," the prince replied, his consciousness radiating determination that made their shared awareness glow with purpose. "And that means we have work to do." As the rescued refugees were brought safely to Helix Station, Sarah and Prince KLTHYSS prepared to meet with the Zephyrian High Council and the representatives from dozens of other species who would soon arrive with their own demands and expectations. They had proven that cross-species neural integration could accomplish the impossible. Now they had to ensure that the technology they had accidentally discovered would be used to unite the galaxy rather than tear it apart. The real test of their partnership was just beginning. The weight of responsibility that came with their accidental discovery. Through her enhanced perception, she could see the threads of consciousness that connected every living being in the galaxy, and she could sense the potential for those connections to become permanent and universal. "Dr. THYSS Nara," she said finally, "we'll need time to adapt to our new capabilities and to understand the full implications of what we've created. But I think we all know that this won't remain a secret for long." "No," the prince agreed, his thoughts carrying a mix of anticipation and trepidation. "It won't. And when the galaxy learns what's possible, everything will change." As Sarah settled back onto the medical table, her consciousness swimming in the vast ocean of enhanced perception that her neural integration had opened, she realized that her simple decision to help a disabled alien prince had become something far more significant than she had ever imagined. She was no longer just Dr. Sarah Chun, human physician. She was part of something new, something that might be the key to achieving true understanding between all the conscious beings in the galaxy. It was a responsibility that felt almost too large to comprehend, but it was also an opportunity to help heal the divisions that had kept the galaxy's diverse species isolated from each other for millennia. Through her connection to the prince's consciousness, she felt his similar realization and his commitment to using their discovery wisely. Together, they had become living proof that the barriers between different forms of consciousness could be overcome. Now they had to figure out what to do with that proof. Sarah thought about her small apartment on the lower levels of Helix Station, about her quiet life as a medical researcher, about all the ordinary human experiences she would be leaving behind. Then, she thought about the incredible reality she had glimpsed through Zephyrian perception, the vast network of consciousness that connected all life in the galaxy, and the opportunity to help two species understand each other in ways they never had before. "Your Highness," she said, "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." As the surgical team began their final preparations, Sarah felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. In a few hours, she would wake up blind to the light that had guided her entire life. But She would also wake up connected to perceptions and possibilities that would make her blindness irrelevant. She was about to become the first human to truly see the universe as it really was, and the first Zephyrian to experience the simple, beautiful directness of human sight. Together, they would discover what it meant to transcend the limitations that had kept their species apart. The last thing Sarah saw with her human eyes was the prince removing his mask, revealing the empty sockets that would soon house her organs of sight. In a few hours, those sockets would hold the gift of her vision, and she would see through his perceptions into the infinite complexity of the cosmos. As the anesthesia began to take effect, Sarah smiled, knowing that when she woke up, she would finally understand what it meant to truly see the stars. Oh, truly see. As Sarah looked into those empty sockets, she felt a strange sense of destiny settling around her. She had no idea that in less than 24 hours, her simple act of medical compassion would set in motion events that would change not just her own life, but the relationship between humanity and the rest of the galaxy forever. The prince replaced his mask and, with his attendant's guidance, moved toward the chamber's exit. At the doorway, he paused. "Dr. Chun," he said without turning around. "Thank you." After he left, Sarah stood alone in the chamber for a long time, staring out through the viewport at the swirling colors of the crimson veil. Tomorrow, she might never see those colors again, but she might see something far more wondrous, or far more terrible, than anything she had ever imagined. She thought about her mother, who had sacrificed so much to give Sarah opportunities she never had. She thought about all the patients she had helped over the years, and all those she hadn't been able to save. She thought about the oath she had taken as a doctor, and the simple truth that some gifts were worth giving regardless of the cost. As she finally left the chamber, Sarah Chun had no way of knowing that her decision would echo across the galaxy, or that the eyes she was preparing to sacrifice would become the foundation for a new understanding between species that had been enemies for generations. All she knew was that tomorrow, a being who had never seen the light would have that chance, and that was enough.